If you've been following this channel for a long time, you know that I'm pretty good friends with the folks over at the Grindline Pod. They have a great show, I have guested on it in the past, and they have some pretty good recapping tweets, which is always what I love the most about them. Now, they also say that they kind of like to make these tweets too, partly for the reasons of putting them in my videos, so big shout out over to the folks over on Grindline. But what they did was they went out there and summarized much of the Steve Yzerman trade deadline press conference. And so what I wanted to do was go through some of these, not all of these, because this is gosh darn long if you haven't already noticed, and just go over some of the extra things that the Red Wings can look forward to, things that Steve Yzerman had in terms of what he's feeling about this trade deadline period, and his entire thought process into why the Wings may have made the moves that they did or made the moves that they didn't end up doing. Just in case you needed the recap, though, the Wings did make one trade at this trade deadline period. They sent away Klim Kostin, and that was it. They didn't get anybody else. They didn't sell anybody else off. When it comes to the question on how do you balance wanting to make a move without mortgaging the future, though, Steve Yzerman answers by asking another question. What's the cost? What's their role? Part of why the Red Wings weren't active is that they like the depth in the organization. Players in Grand Rapids provide that depth without having to spend assets. And so with this, it's pretty evident to recognize that when it comes to the Griffins, that seems to be where a lot of Yzerman's evaluating this perspective from. You got guys like Berggren, by the way, who's probably going to get called up. You have players like Edvinsson. You have other guys down there in the A that are potential NHL players, either right now or sometime into the future. So if you needed that depth, there are some options available down there in Grand Rapids. That seems to be the Red Wings' approach to this conversation. He also said that when it comes to the entire NHL, it's been aggressive and it looks kind of like Canadian junior hockey. A couple of teams getting everything, like the Vegas gosh darn Golden Knights and the Avalanche, eh? They also asked the question, did the playoff projection factor into Steve Yzerman's thought process and decision-making at the deadline? There's a lot of team spirit and enthusiasm in the room, Yzerman said. They still have them in a good spot with the schedule down the stretch. They're still building, though, so Yzerman isn't willing to give up top prospects or picks for rentals or star players. So, like we had been seeing over the past few years, Yzerman is trying to balance both prioritizing the future whilst prioritizing the now. Signing guys like Hall, Gostisbehere, Comfer, Kopp to help out what is already a growing and young core. We know by the time the Red Wings are super competitive again, you're probably not going to see Andrew Kopp or JT Compher in a significant role. But Lucas Raymond? Probably. Larkin? He may be towards the tail end of his prime days, but probably still. Then you still have Edvinsson, Seider, and Kosa, everybody else developing down there. Marco Kasper has some value as well. So there is a good idea to build for the future whilst also prioritizing short-term success to give these guys experience. When it comes to the idea of trading a first or a second round pick to bring in a replacement level player, Yzerman said that just didn't really make sense. We have picks moving forward, great prospects, and a good core. Guys are coming in from Grand Rapids and the NCAA. It just takes time. There's no set timeline, but it is progressing and they are doing their best to expedite the process. Now, when Yzerman was asked about the Grand Rapids Griffins' performance, it seems like they are pleased with the team and development. He also mentioned that if the Wings need someone to step in, they have Berggren and Edvinsson, so there you go, that's exactly what we had just talked about. They don't need to give up draft picks to get guys like that. Now, when it comes to the Kostin trade, he says that it was to clear cap for next season. It didn't make sense keeping a guy on the bench at $2 million a year, and that's pretty much what we had talked about in the recap video itself when we talked about Kostin getting sent over for Radim Šimek. And there also was another comment from Yzerman where he said he didn't really feel comfortable trading Kostin, but he acknowledged that it's kind of what they had to do to get things done. And we also said back in the video that because Kostin's going over to San Jose, there's going to be a lot more of an opportunity for him to actually play there, especially since they just traded away Tomas Hertl, so lots of room to move around in San Jose, definitely not the same as what was going on in Detroit. Yzerman says that the Rings are going 11-7 tonight, and there will at least be one call-up after everything is said and done. The Red Wings do have themselves a game later against the Arizona Coyotes, so we'll see what happens there. Yzerman also talked about Edvinsson and Berggren during this press conference. The Wings and the prospects have discussed what they needed to do, and the prospects have gone out and improved and had been excellent. They have bought into the system and the plan and excelled. They are key players logging big minutes on a good team, and it's only a matter of time before they're in the NHL. Yzerman also said that keeping these guys in Grand Rapids is not only about this year, it's about the next 15 years, building them into career NHL players. So from this quote, essentially what we're hearing is that I don't think the Wings feel that Edvinsson and Berggren are 82-game NHL ready just yet. Like, getting a cup of coffee wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but are they full established NHL guys right now? It doesn't seem to be the case, so giving them just a little bit more time to marinate before taking that next step, that seems to be the thought process behind this decision. When it comes to Edvinsson, Yzerman says that he's wanted Edvinsson to run a power play and get in offensive situations. He says he is an excellent defender and has built confidence, great at boxing out and reading the plays. Overall, he's been really good. There also was a conversation about pending UFAs. Yzerman has talked with most agents and said he wants to see how the season plays out and where we go with RFA term and money. They will impact the UFA guys. Not sure if they can bring everybody back, but as of right now, they need to sign their RFAs, with Seider and Raymond being the main players. So, not really the most surprising thing in the world. They're prioritizing their RFAs before talking about the UFAs, but they do kind of have some sort of an idea of what the market would look like for these guys, whilst saying pretty much, yeah, like, we want to see how you can play here and decide whether or not we want to bring you back, because we are eligible to sign you, it's just, we'd rather keep you here for now. When it comes to the human side of the trade, Steve says that Klim was an example and he talked to his agent to get him a bigger role. He said he talked to some teams about their vets and said moving them and their families would be difficult. So that's another intriguing perspective as well in regards to the Kostan trade, how the Wings couldn't really just open up the space to give Kostan more opportunity in Detroit, mostly because that would come at the expense of some of the guys that are vets in this league that do have families and everything. And Yzerman says, man, like, that's a human element that isn't really present when objectively looking at how to build your hockey team using the pens and papers and using the goals and assists. The family aspect and everything surrounding the game is as important to pay attention to. You can debate whether or not that's actually valid, but hey, Steve Yzerman went out there and said it. There also are some extra comments made on a few of the other prospects. There's a talk about Edvinsson. There's a talk about Seattle being a blueprint to win without the superstar. Yzerman said that they didn't try not to get a superstar, but he also mentioned Vegas and their depth when they won. Contenders add pieces to keep going. He also mentioned the depth on the St. Louis team in 2019 that won the Stanley Cup then. Says you just need a good, deep team. There also is a conversation about Patrick Kane, his impact there, how surprised he is with Patrick Kane's ability this season. At worst, he would be useful in the power play, but he's still getting more comfortable and keeps getting better. Then there's an interesting conversation about Berggren. If Berggren is called up, would he be here to stay, given if he plays 4 games he'd have to clear waivers? Yes. Steve says he doesn't think he'd clear waivers. He'd stay for the playoffs. They're going to do everything they can to win games and make the playoffs and not hold him down just for Grand Rapids. So depending on what the Red Wings feel Berggren is capable of, we'll probably see him stick around if he's actually showing off well. There also is even more conversation happening about Larkin. There's a talk about the new guy, Radim Šimek, that we had talked about just a few hours ago. And then there are a few other comments about the prospects, Kosa, Willander, Willander. Completely different prospect right there, but to end things off, there is a conversation as to whether or not the Wings don't make the playoffs. What exactly is the value there? If they weren't in the position they were in, making trades would have been easier, so he doesn't think he won't regret it if they don't make the playoffs. If they were out, he wasn't going to just trade one UFA, he was going to trade them all. There wasn't enough interest in trying to sell off any UFAs, really. If they miss, they miss. Regardless of what happens, Yzerman says he won't have any regrets about this trade deadline. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this entire thing. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to read it yourself. The Grindline guys did a good job at compiling these thoughts. But how do you feel about the Red Wings and their trade deadline in 2024? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.